So on to the second episode of our Fate dissection. If you are new here, we are going through the entire first season of the live-action reimagination of the Winx Club world, Fate the Winx Saga, episode by episode, and I'm giving my thoughts and opinions and theories, and even giving a little comparison and contrast to the original series. So let's get into it. Hey there, welcome to the Winx Forever Podcast. I'm Lola, creator, host, and lifelong Winx fan. I'm taking a deep dive into the very cool universe of Winx Club. So whether you've been a Winx fan since 2004 like myself, or you vaguely remember the show from your childhood, or you're being introduced to it for the first time, welcome. This is the Winx Forever Podcast. Fate the Winx Saga, Season 1, Episode 2, No Strangers Here. The non-descriptive description of the second episode says, "A new day dawns as students explore their powers and feelings. Bloom and Stella team up for a mission. The Burned One's reign of terror evolves." I high-key don't like the episode titles or the descriptions. I don't think that they are that creative, not to say that the original series had any better creative titles, but whatever. So this episode opens with Farrah Dowling and Saul Silva walking together to go visit their little burned friend while reminiscing of the days of fighting to keep Solaria safe from the same creatures. They speak about all of this as though it's centuries ago, though the events they're discussing only happened anywhere between 16 or 17 years prior. I've seen a lot of fans point to this exact detail about Fate and say it's really weird for them to talk about this like it was so long ago, like ages ago. But honestly, the original Winx series does the same exact thing. Farragonda talks about the destruction of Domino and the Company of Light's battle against the ancestral witches as though it had happened centuries ago. Over the years, I also always thought that this was an odd detail about the original series until I started reading the Harry Potter series recently. Everyone in Harry Potter acts like the height of Voldemort's power was centuries ago, yet it was an even shorter time ago than the destruction of Domino in the original Winx series. I also like to think back on my life and think to myself, what was I doing 17 years ago? Well, I was getting up at 6:30 a.m. on Saturday mornings to watch Winx Club as a 9-year-old. And that is what I was doing. You know what I mean? 17 years is a long time. I feel like their passive talk about their past as though it was a lifetime ago could legitimately feel that way. Especially if it was a traumatic experience that they're really trying to block out of their memory. I love the way that we get to see Saul's and Farrah's relationship in this scene with the Burned One. He's a protector, like Sky, but also the look that Farrah gives him when he asks, what if there's more Burned Ones? I love the, shut up look she gives him, just dead eye. It's great. You can kind of see these little nuanced interactions throughout the first season of Fate between Farrah and Saul. So Farrah can't access the Burned One's mind like she was hoping she could, and it lashes out on her, thanks to Beatrix waking it up the night before, no doubt. And then the next sequence of scenes, all the girls in the Winx suite are getting ready for the day, and it was really cute. I will say in my last episode discussing the first episode of Fate, I might have been a little harsh with saying that Tara's struggle with body image was cheap writing. I had a friend of mine point out to me that this particular scene helped show her how specifically a girl who struggles with a negative body image thinks of things as simple as changing in front of other girls, like other small-sized girls. I honestly didn't think about the ways that this characteristic can be helpful to those who don't understand this struggle. So for that, I'm grateful to my friend who shared this with me and shared her perspective. I do, however, still think that it's just a super predictable move with a plus-size character to struggle with body image. Tara at least has other things that she works through in season 1, for instance, her feelings like she has to be happy and cheery all the time, and I'm hoping that they start to explore that deeper in the second season. In walks Stella, showing up in last night's party attire, which Musa points out right away. I really love Musa and Stella's interaction here. The jabs back and forth are great, and definitely things that the OG Winx first season Stella and Musa would say to each other, in my opinion. The whole getting the ring back plot is so nostalgic to me. I do wish that it was like a different evil force looking to use Stella's ring for evil, but instead the burned one kind of just fell on it and it got stuck inside of it. It's gross, burned, fleshy body. Ew. Even still, this plot does kind of band the girls together for whatever motives individually, but it is really cool to me. It also really seems to reveal a lot about each character of why they end up helping in the first place, even if Musa and Aisha were adamantly against it in the beginning of the episode.
You're listening to the Winx Forever Podcast.
This first lesson, taught by the headmistress herself to a bunch of first years, was a little underwhelming at first. I still can't get over the fact that there are literally only 3 professors in this whole dang Althea college. But besides that, Farrah shouldn't be teaching first years, in my opinion. I do like how in this scene we get a lot more insight into these new elemental powers and what they're capable of. Well, all except fire and light, which we do find out a little more about them later in the season. As I've mentioned before, water and earth fairies seem to be able to have a lot of the same capabilities as benders from Avatar: The Last Airbender series. Air, however, has a lot of different abilities associated with it. According to Dowling's mini introduction, air fairies may have speed, temperature, sound, power, and electrical properties. That's pretty cool. And I'm not saying I'm upset that Musa was made a mind fairy, because I do truly like that fit for her fate persona. However, there's no reason why she couldn't have been an actual air fairy with sound powers. Hello, fairy of music, sound powers, it's right there. Also, I believe that Tekna could come into the series as an air fairy with electrical properties. I mean, it would be really easy. It really seems that air is just such an OP element in Fate, and I am curious to see what all they do with it next. I'm also just very excited to learn more about the lore behind their powers and this mystical stone circle that they practice their powers in, that Farrah says their magic is magnified in the stone circles. Hopefully we will get answers in season 2, but at the very least in this prequel to the Fate novelization, A Fairy's Path, that's been leaked, we are getting probably late fall. And then there's Bloom, the fairy we get to see given a chance to display her powers in the vessel at the stone circle, but Farrah doesn't grace us with a little mini introduction for fire element fairies. So we still have some things to assume about this power. Similar to the original series, Fate Bloom can't summon an ounce of magic during her first Althea class. She becomes frustrated and asks to move on. Clearly still very tilted from the night before, Bloom has a hard time focusing on displaying her powers in the vessel, and TBH, Farrah's instructions weren't very helpful. After her first class, Bloom confronts Farrah about knowing that she was a changeling and had a hard time with the little to no information that she still gets out of Farrah. But my favorite part of this interaction was not Farrah being surprised that Bloom even knew that she was a changeling. It was how Farrah just straight out calls Bloom out for being a whiny, mouthy teenager when she's like, "Tone." I laugh every time. Farrah definitely has an idea of what Bloom's presence on Earth meant, since she mentioned it to Saul the night before in her office. It's not until much later that we get to understand what the extent of this all means. Even Farrah doesn't seem to truly put it all together, well, until the last 4 minutes of episode 6. However, I think that Farrah Dowling knows a lot more than the audience is led to believe. I think that she knew about the dragon flame and how the burned ones were created. I think she understands and knows the dangers she's facing uncovering a changeling on Earth. Why else would she straight up keep a lady locked in her dungeon for over 16 years? I mean, Farrah's not dumb. She's a badass.
If you're enjoying this episode of the Winx Forever podcast, consider following us on our social media at WinxForeverNews.
I don't have much to say about the Dane and Riven scene, other than here, Riven seems to me that he really is just trying to help Dane as a first-year little specialist. However, he does it in the most annoying, rude, Riven way possible. Riven is a jerk, but somewhere deep inside, he's a good person. And I think that Sky sees that. Ah, yes. Stella comes running to Sky for help. Classic codependency. Funny that Sky is like, yeah, of course, I'll steal a specialist map and get your ring back that you carelessly gave to Bloom to go back to Earth to see her parents, where an ancient monster attacked her and absorbed your ring. No problem, I can do that. Like, he doesn't ask any questions. Stella really does think that everyone is out to get her just because her mom is the Queen of Celeria, not because she's a jerk to everyone. And honestly, Fate swapped one toxic relationship with another, with Stella and Sky's relationship being so codependent, which they come to that conclusion later on in the season, but it's just so crazy to me to see Stella in this light. Get it? Because she's a light fairy. Anyway, moving on. Ugh. The scene where Beatrix finds Riven at the specialist training facilities, I can't with this scene. Beatrix is so annoying to me, especially in this scene. She just seems like she's trying way too hard to be, like, cool. I don't know. It's just, ugh. The line that this line where she's like, because you're a guy and I am hot, is the dumbest line in the whole show. I stand by that. But, man. Riven really is kind of dumb. Always getting played by the female villains. At least they got this part correct in Fate. The whole canteen lunch scene is really cool to me. Seeing all the girls interact together in a normal, non-life-threatening situation is something that I wish we'd gotten more of in the first season. But again, 6 episodes was really hard to cram all of that into, so I forgive that. Musa explaining her powers to Aisha was really cool. I hope to see more of this friendship dynamic in season 2 because of the original series, Musa and Aisha were best friends, and it honestly was one of my favorite friendships between any of the Winx. When they all sit down at the table to eat together, discussing ways to help Bloom with how to channel her powers has very strong OG Winx season 1 episode 3 vibes to me. The closer I rewatch Fate, the more commonalities that I'm picking up on between Fate and the OG Winx series, and honestly, I'm loving it. Oh, man. Poor Abby Cowan, the actress that plays Bloom, her makeup artist colored her brows way too dark in some of the early scenes of Fate season 1, and you can see it in this scene at the lunch table, but you can also see it in the scene when Bloom and Aisha have the conversation about Bloom being a changeling in episode 1. But, oh my gosh, it's just, they're literally black and she has red hair. And they get it right eventually, but holy moly. So Stella and Sky walk up with a plan to get her ring back. And it doesn't really sound like a plan, it just more sounds like a bunch of ideas to me. They don't even know for sure that the barn is where Farrah and Saul are keeping the burned one. Stella really came in with Sky assuming that she would bully the rest of her sweetmates into helping her get her ring back, which she kind of successfully does with Bloom, obviously. She also wanted to probably parade Sky around Bloom to establish dominance, in my opinion. Classic catty girl stuff. And poor Tara, she just wants to be helpful and useful, but she's also clearly intimidated by Stella. Oh, man. Okay, so this next scene. When Sky runs after Bloom, and legitimately he looks like a cartoon character, the way that he runs into the little garden area. It's so funny looking. Go back and watch how he just kind of skids to a halt and then runs towards. It's so funny. The fact that Sky felt the need to come explain himself to Bloom about his and Stella's complicated relationship. Nothing says insecure like oversharing with a girl you just met yesterday. Too harsh? Okay, I'll stop. I do love when he's like, I just don't want you to think that I'm that guy. What does he mean by that exactly? I also love Bloom's response here. Just straight up is like, dude, I just met you yesterday. I don't think about you at all. Yeah, put him in his place, Bloom.
You're listening to the Winx Forever podcast.
I have issues with Beatrix and Riven just casually breaking into Dowling's office. There's no way that Dowling doesn't realize someone's broken into her office, but at the same time, I know that she's been preoccupied with the dang burned one thing that she's keeping as a pet in a barn outside of the barrier, so I guess that could check out. However, WinxForeverPodcast would never allow such carelessness. As much as Beatrix annoys me, the comment that she makes about Riven's vape is pretty iconic. Which, of course, freaking Riven vapes. Stella's private magic lesson with Bloom in the stone circle was really cool. Bloom heads back to the stone circle to practice her magic when she's met by Stella, who starts hurling some pretty gnarly insults towards her about being a changeling, which makes Bloom really angry, and Stella encourages her to use that anger and rage as emotions to fuel her powers. Now, this is a stretch, and this scene isn't exactly the same scene in Winx Season 1, Episode 3, where Stella is helping Bloom with her hair color changing assignment from WizGiz's class, but it is reminiscent of it to me. Because Fate Stella and Winx Stella are very different, Fate Stella is really just helping Bloom so that she can be of better use to her and getting her ring back, and doesn't have any thought of Bloom's best interest in mind.
Who's your favorite relationship in Fate? Let me know in the DMs on my social media.
Okay, so the following scenes, we get to see 5 different relationships forming. The first being Musa and Aisha. I know that we'd just seen them at lunch the day before, discussing Musa's power, how it works, how she feels other people's presence. But this interaction with Musa and Aisha is one of my favorite Winx Sweetmate interactions in the whole first season of Fate. The little comment Musa says to Aisha about hating her forever, when Aisha gets Sam's attention, which really Musa should be thanking her. I laugh every time at this. I think it's so pure and cute, and something that the original characters would say and do. This scene is also important since Musa flat out asks Aisha why she's so hellbent on being friends with Bloom, which Aisha responds, aren't roommates supposed to be friends? I love this response because it gives us a glimpse into Aisha's perception of what her college experience was supposed to be like. Almost like she has a checklist of things that she has to accomplish, like an assignment she's afraid to fail. I think that this says a lot about the Fate Aisha we were given, and I'm really excited to see them explore that more in the future in Season 2. Perfect segue. The next relationship we see the beginnings of in this string of sequences are Sam and Musa. Samusa. I don't know. Honestly, it's just refreshing to see Musa's character in a normal relationship. Please, please, please don't let her get with Riven in Season 2. Just don't do it. And then we move on to Dane and Tara. So Dane and Tara had a little friendship moment when she saved him from the bullying effects of Riven at the Althea welcome party the night before. Dana and Tara, I think, are cute as friends, but I don't think that they should be romantically involved. I think that they could even be really good best friends, but in my opinion, Tara needs a girlfriend. Maybe in season 2. Maybe season 2 will give us better options for romantic interests for Tara. And then, of course, we see Riven and Beatrix. Riventrix just makes sense. Not only could that also be a ship name for them in the original series, but it just seems that Riven and Beatrix are together while Riven is figuring himself out, and kind of the same goes for the original series. She does call him on some of his BS, so that's nice, but also he'll find out that she's bad news and come crawling back to Sky, it's gonna happen. I don't know if it'll happen in season 2, but it will happen. We've been here before. We know what happens. Beatrix does deliver yet another zinger of a comment about Sky dating Stella while sharing a vape with Riven in their dorm room, even though just a few scenes ago she degraded Riven for vaping, but oh well. Riven informs that Silva is preparing the burned one to be transferred to the Solarian prison, where the Queen will then interrogate it. Obviously, this is bad. Sky knows that the thing saw Stella's ring, and if the Queen finds it, well, it'll be disastrous for Stella. Beatrix, conveniently, then has to go to the library, though we all know she's running to go set the burned one free, so what the heck. And then finally, the final relationship dynamic scene we get out of this sequence is with Bloom and Aisha. The two are hanging out in their dorm room doing homework when Aisha asserts her opinion about how she doesn't think that Bloom should be learning magic from Stella after seeing Bloom's notes on her desk earlier. The scene was an important follow-up to Musa and Aisha's conversation in the canteen. Aisha is so worried that she'll mess things up with Bloom and they won't be friends, yet she doesn't let that stop her from advising against something she truly believes is going to be harmful to Bloom's growth as a fairy, which I think speaks a lot to Aisha's integrity as a true friend. And then Stella barges in and says it's go time and it's time to get her ring back. Bloom and Stella set off and Aisha begrudgingly follows as to make sure that no one gets hurt. She believes that Stella's power is useless and Bloom's powers are unreliable, so naturally she has to tag along to make sure no one dies. They really don't deserve Aisha. Honestly, I've given Fate a lot of crap about Althea's one rule being don't cross the barrier, and literally everyone does. But really, this also happens in the original series. The Winx are all the time crossing the dang barrier. Tecna even made a gadget to help them sneak out through a weak spot in the barrier at one point. Fate is pretty spot on with this aspect. The girls make it to where the burned one is being held, or was being held. They find out it's gone and assume that they've already taken it to the capital of Solaria. However, they find that it's actually just on the loose when Musa and Tara discover a whole brigade of specialists torn to shreds all around the backside of the barn. And among the carnage lies Silva barely breathing. When Tara calls on the others in the barn, Stella and Aisha come running, but Bloom stays behind. She stays behind in the barn, distracted by a whisper she hears faintly. Of course, she goes to investigate the whisper. Oh, Bloom, haven't you ever seen a horror film? Don't you know that this is how the first character dies? Musa sensing someone in pain was such a cool and scary moment in this episode. Musa, cannot handle the pain that she senses with Silva. I love this because Tara is being able to help Musa refocus on what's important. That Silva is scared, but Tara wasn't, and that she should focus on the energy of Tara instead. This was really cool because, if Sam, Tara's brother, can help bring Musa peace, why can't Tara? I don't know. It was just a cool thought. So Stella and Aisha set off to find Bloom, and Aisha basically says that Stella is useless and to go back to school to find actual help. Ouch. Stella goes to get Sky, but at the same time, Tara and Musa just show up with Silva all mangled and gross, and Sky immediately ignores Stella to go help attend to Silva. But, like, man, Stella probably felt the most useless in this moment. Not only did she take forever trying to get back to Althea, but she made it back there, like, not moments before the other two carrying a full-grown injured man. Like, the people that she went to go get help for, like, almost beat her to the school. Not helpful. Oh my gosh, poor Stella. Meanwhile, Bloom is still off searching for, like, this weird whispery voice. Good. When she comes, like, face to face with a burned one. She finally is able to, like, summon her powers, but, it's burned already. So it virtually does nothing. It just, like, wades through the flames while still, like, coming towards Bloom. Right up until Aisha blasts it with a water cannon, impaling it into a conveniently placed tree branch nearby. Gross, 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 gross. Bloom goes to retrieve Stella's ring that's literally stuck. Ugh. Literally stuck in the burned one's body. I'm curious to learn more about the burned ones in season 2. Like, are they from Domino? Are they Bloom's people? Do they have the ability to process thoughts and emotions? Like, are they truly just monsters? Because if they have, like, capacity to process thought, did this burned one get Stella's ring on purpose, knowing that Bloom couldn't get back to the other world without it, trying to trap her in the warehouse in Gardenia? Like, there's so many thoughts. I'd love to hear your theories on burned ones. Feel free to DM me on social media. During all of this hoopla, the burned one and Silva almost dying, Beatrix is left unattended in Dowling's office, leaving her plenty of time to investigate the secret passage to the underground tunnels that she no doubt discovered earlier in the episode when Riven and herself broke into Dowling's office. In this scene, we get to find out that she and the headmistress's assistant Callum are working together to out Dowling on some secret she's been hiding under the school, apparently. Ooh, intrigue. Once everything settles down, Aisha and Bloom get back to the Winx suite, and so does Stella and Sky. Stella doesn't even thank Bloom for retrieving her ring from the burned one, and freaking parades Sky in front of her, and all the Skloom fans cry. And then the episode ends with this really nice tender moment between Bloom and Aisha. Bloom explains to her why she was such a brat when Aisha was literally just trying to help. And Aisha reveals that this, meaning like friendship, is all new to her and she just wants it to go well, which Bloom shares that she feels the same way. It's really cool to see this moment and important to the rest of the season as we see Aisha and Bloom's friendship grow and also tested in the rest of season 1. So the episode ends with Bloom discussing how she finally opened herself up to magic, and then her eyes go white and her face is like a blank stare, and roll credits. We love a good cliffhanger. I really liked this episode. We get introduced further to Winx characters and even introduced to new characters like Sam. We also get to see some beginnings of relationships that become important later in the season. Similar to last episode, I recorded my initial thoughts when I watched Fate for the first time through, so I will leave you with those now.
Episode 2. Fate the Winx Saga. Still no mention of the word Winx. A little disappointed. I hate Beatrix. She's the worst villain, I think, of the Winx Club franchise ever. She's not threatening. She's really, really annoying. I hate her face. I hate her name. I hate the way she does her hair. She's the worst. We needed someone like really hardcore and badass. Like Icy. Icy was freaking the baddest witch ever. I miss the rivalry between Cloud Tower and Althea. I miss the futuristic like technology that the original series had. Seeing like motor vehicles on the show was very odd. Like, why are they not hovering? They should be hovering. Why do they have real swords? They should be. laser swords or whatever the freak. But that's okay. I'm okay with it. Like, I know it's not a, exact telling of the original series, but it is weird.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of the Winx Forever podcast, consider following our social media linked in the show notes below. The Winx Forever podcast theme is the song She Makes Magic by Big Wild.